All right, let's take a quick look at the lesson for the next two sections you're going to work on, which is identifying audience and purpose and comparing passages for tone. So first, let's go ahead and jump into identifying audience and purpose. So audience, who's it written for? Purpose, why is it written? So here's the thing. Once again, you can read these and go looking for an answer, but that doesn't work really with these higher level questions, because this is about understanding the entire purpose, which means understanding the entire passage. So we can read these first. Who's the primary audience? Journalists reporting on the charter, members of the United Nations, residents of San Francisco, or American voters. But now let's read the whole thing. We, the people of the United Nations, are determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm faith in the fundamental human rights, to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom. Accordingly, our respective government, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations. All right, so who's the primary audience? Journalists? Probably not. Members of the United Nations, residents of San Francisco. They're meeting in San Francisco, so they just assembled there. So I can rule that one out. American voters, there's really nothing about Americans voting on this. This is the United Nations, and so this feels like this is more for the members because it doesn't really mention journalists. Okay. So now, which best indicates the primary audience is members of the United Nations? So what evidence in that? Great things, I don't have to read it again here. The writer provides information about the United Nations. Well, yeah, does that. The writer informs the audience that representatives have gathered in San Francisco. Yeah, that's true. The writer encourages human rights and social progress. That's true. The writer defines that we, the peoples of the United Nations, have agreed to. That's true. So what we see here is we have a situation where all four answers are true. But which one is correct is the one that best explains this. So it indicates that the audience is members of the United Nations. I think this one, because this is telling us about the rights. This is telling us where we met. And this is general information. This one defines who the people are. Okay. And now finally, what's the text's purpose? Is it to persuade new countries to join the nation? To encourage world leaders to support the United Nations? To persuade United Nations members to engage in more humanitarian activities, or to establish shared goals for member states of the United Nations. So this gets a little bit difficult here. Now we got to kind of go back and look at it. So are they establishing goals here? It seems like it. We exist to do this, we exist to do this, we exist to do this, and we've all agreed to that. So that makes me feel like that because of it's an agreement on all these things, it's really about sharing these common goals. To states to engage more, and I think that will happen to encourage world leaders. It doesn't really reach out to them. So I think this is the one that best, again, the whole thing seems to be working on laying out these goals that they've agreed to and share. And that's what you want to do when you work through identifying the audience and the purpose. It's who is it for? How do I know that? What is its purpose? And it really is about understanding the entire piece. All right, real quick, let's jump in and look at comparing passages for tone. So select the passage that has more of a sorrowful tone. So if you're not sure what that's asking, you can go Command C, boop, come over here, go Command V, and we know sorrowful, that's a pretty easy word, sad, unhappy, dejected. So which one of these feels more sad, unhappy, dejected? Afterward, he walked through the dull, powerful word, ache of the setting sun. Even the clouds seemed bleeding. At twilight, he came to a graveyard. There was the ghost of a new moon in the sky and shadows everywhere. Well, that's certainly dark and depressing. The twilight was gone and the snow was invisible as I came down to the side of the lake. Only the moon, white and shining, was in the sky like a woman glorying in her own loveliness. Well, that's kind of peaceful and beautiful. So this one's definitely more sorrowful. Again, the tone is the feeling you get as the reader, the tone of voice. So think of it this way: if you have a discussion with your parents or your brother or sister or your teacher or your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're like, why are you using that tone with me? It's the way we say something. It's sometimes the words we choose, but it can also be the way it's shared. So again, which of this passages has a more jubilant tone? If you don't know that this means like happy and excited, then you can just go wham, drop this in right here. Jubilant, feeling, expressing great happiness or triumph. Okay. The more happy celebratory one. After 4 months passed, all the trees in the woods burst forth, and the green twigs grew thickly together. The little birds sang, so the whole wood rang. That means the woods. And the blossoms fell from the trees. That seems pretty positive about being happy. The trees display narrow pointed leaves and clusters of scaly buds. Flowers appear in early spring, mostly surrounded at the base by large scales. So that sounds scientific. This sounds happy and positive and jubilant. This sounds scientific. I'm going with this one. Boom. And that's how you do tone. So after you work through these, you have an understanding of how just word choice and details can change the feel of a passage by the tone that the author uses. All right, that is the instructions and TUTS for this section. Good luck.